Did he come today? Thank you all to who could make it, who could come from their battles victorious and ready to go on to the next one. Today we have a very juicy, very good topic waiting for us. I think there's something in it for all of us, and we're going to dive right in. We're going to start off with a question. When was the last time you experienced stress?
When I was like 15.
You were 15. I can tell by your tan that not anytime soon. Today. Wow. Very relevant stuff. I think when we think back to the last time we experienced stress, we don't have to think back too long. You know, Russ was saying about the whole fiasco with the airport and the bags and, so on and so forth. I'm sure that that's just a drop in the ocean of how many things we live through and how much stress is that we have to conquer. So I think we can answer for ourselves. The last time probably wasn't that long ago. Follow-up question, how was that experience? Was it fun? Was it stressful? Was it memorable? Okay. Did it leave any lasting impacts?
Yes, don't do that again.
I think anytime we face a stressful situation, we come out of it, like maybe our shirt's a little drenched, or maybe, we're going through some things, and it definitely is memorable, definitely leaves an impact. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of the experience you went through, you probably didn't even notice. We're going to dive into a little bit of science here. What stress does to the body. For those that can't read, I'm going to read these out. So we have two kinds. We have short-term and long-term. In short-term, you're going to feel worried, nervous, unable to switch off, that adrenaline's pumping, your heart's beating harder, beating faster, pumping more blood to major muscles. Your breathing can quicken to send more oxygen around the body. You might have tummy issues. It might constrict. You might not be able to feel as relaxed. Your skin becomes more sensitive and your muscles really tense up. Your body is just going through a cascade of different kinds of things happening to it, and that's just short term. If you continue to be in this state of stress for a long time, the long term, you're going to start feeling effects such as headaches, migraines, mental health issues, heart problems, skin problems, hair problems, so on and so forth. So your body actually reacts to stress in a very serious way that we might not even feel or might not even know, but our body knows and our body's going through it. Because it's ready for fight or flight. See, God created our bodies in such a way that a lot of the processes we don't think about. It happens under the surface level. And where, say, if we come face to face with a tiger, all of a sudden our body's pumping this adrenaline so that we can, get out of dodge, as they say. And that's why we need stress, to help us, continue to survive. But we use stress in a very unhealthy way more often than not, because, here we're not facing any tigers. We're not facing any kind of savages or even war on our front. But still, as many of you said, we have experienced stress, and we've experienced it recently. And in fact, the damage goes so deep that it affects your DNA. As I'm sure you've seen guys that have white hair, right? Like this guy. Very stressed out, young age, already looking kind of old.
Justin Bieber?
I guess so, yeah. He's been through some rough times. He had a little piercing there. He got stressed out, standing next to a construction site, and they got him. Turned his hair all white. So, Harvard's proven this. Many kind of universities, scientific studies have proven that stress changes your molecular structure. It can lead to rapid aging. It can lead to basically a shorter life. Here we read that chronic stress is linked to 6 leading causes of death: heart disease, cancer, lung ailments, accidents, cirrhosis of liver, and suicide. More than 75% out of every 4 people, 3 that come in, come for stress-related ailments and complaints. This statistic kind of shocked me Because I don't know if this was such an issue 100 years ago or 200 years ago. People were coming in broken bones, sort of their own ailments. I have a cough, I have a fever. But now, since we've kind of taken care of those things, our medicine's gotten really good, now we're coming in for stress-related ailments. And not only that, the 6 leading causes of death are due to stress. So you know what this tells me? This tells me this is a very serious issue that needs a very serious approach. So say you're a physician, right? You're a doctor. Your patient comes in, one after the other. All these patients coming in, 3 out of 4. And they're saying, I have stress, I have stress, I have stress, I have stress. What medicine would you prescribe them? Chill pill. Nice. Is that the hard to swallow pill? Because think about it, right? This is a problem that's affecting 75% of Americans, at least. I'm not sure about the world, but at least Americans, 75%. So what kind of medicine or what kind of treatments would you give to an ailing patient? Russ would give a chill pill. How about anyone else?
Chill shot.
A chill shot. Okay, a quick jab with the chill. Reading that same article, here's what they say. Coping with chronic stress can begin with something as simple as getting perspective on your situation. Take a step back and circle the bait. Which says what? That stress is a very much of an extrinsic factor. Stress is something that happens outside of us that we let affect us inside. So we basically invite stress in based off of our perspective of the situation. Very easy remedy for something that's so serious that affects 75% of people. Our perspective influences our stress levels. Take a look at this guy. This guy's perspective is that he's coming face to face with a predator. And this predator, look at all those teeth. Oh man, he's going to come and get him. He's going to chase him down. So he's turning on his stress level, turning on adrenaline, and running as quick as he can away from danger. But that same person could be like, well, wait a second. Let me gain a new perspective. This is just a dog. Look at its tongue all, drooping out. It's actually quite harmless. Turns out this isn't a predator. This is just a little tiny dog that doesn't really seem all that much harmful anymore. Same person, same situation, 2 different perspectives. And we're going to talk a lot about that today from a biblical standpoint and a spiritual standpoint. But before we get into that, let's ask this question to the crowd. What stressful situations are we facing today? We're not facing tigers. Okay, we're not facing, bloodthirsty hounds. What are we facing? Cyberbullies. Russ, what are you facing today?
Lack of followers on Instagram.
Dude. That's very stressful. Maybe we're trying to find a job. And they say, nah, rejected. You come looking your best, you come looking your sharpest, you tried your hardest, and they say, no, not you. Or maybe you lost your keys. Have you ever lost your keys? This is a very stressful situation. I spent hours trying to find my keys. Or maybe you're a little bit of both, can't get a job, so you can't get money to even have keys to a car because they keep rejecting you. And so on and so forth. But we really have a lot of modern problems, modern examples of stress where 100, 200 years ago, this didn't affect people at all. So what kind of stresses are we facing today? A lot of work-related things, people-related things, material object-related things. And we tie these outside things inside, and we let them cause stress inside of us. That, as we've read, causes crazy amounts of damage that basically leads people to die earlier. Today, if you haven't already figured this out, we're going to talk about stress. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how to mitigate stress, how to deal with it, or maybe even get rid of it entirely. A chill pill is good for a day or two, But that pillow needs to be the size of a couch to really last you your whole life. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about how can we gain a new perspective. And we're going to dive into the Bible. As always, we're going to have a little picture to give us a little bit of foreshadowing of what we'll talk about. Does anybody know what's happening here? It's a tough one. Somebody is carrying something. No, it's not Sodom and Gomorrah, but that's a good guess. Nice. I got you guys.
Is that Samson?
It is not Samson. Okay, good. So we're going to learn something new today. We're going to turn our Bibles to chapter 6 in the book of 2 Kings, and we will start reading there. Now the king of Aram was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officers, he said, I will set up my camp in such and such a place. But the man of God sent a word to the king of Israel, beware of passing that place, because the Arameans are going down there. So the king of Israel checked on the place indicated by the man of God. Time and again, Elisha warned the king so that he was on guard in such places. So here's a little backstory of what we're going to talk about. Here we see Israel. And Israel, to the right of it, is another country, Aram or Aram. And the king of that country didn't like to be next to Israel. He wanted to be in Israel. He wanted to get Israel for himself. So he continually tried to invade it from the left, from the right, from up top. He was always thinking, how can I attack Israel? And so as we read, he was at war with them, and he'd be like, you know what, I'm going to set up camp here. And then I'm going to set up camp there. And we'll attack them this way, and we'll attack them from that way. But there was a man of God who told the king of Israel, like, hey, they're collecting over there. Don't go there. Or they're going to start attacking you from here. Try to not go there either. And every time that this king would try to attack them, the king of Israel would somehow, basically, luckily get away from there and not be able to get himself attacked. The king of Aram didn't like this very much. It's enraged him. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, tell me, which of us is on the side of the king of Israel? Who's a spy here? Who's telling him all of our plans? None of us, my lord the king, said one of his officers. But Elijah the prophet, who's in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. Go and find out where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men and capture him. King Aram didn't like that his plans were kept getting foiled over and over again. So he told his army, he told his captain, hey, go and find that guy and bring him to me, and I'm going to deal with him. Now, an interesting thing happened. I'm just going to kind of paraphrase here before we get to the main story. But the soldiers ended up finding Elisha. They ended up finding Elisha, and Elisha's servant got really scared, and he was like, oh, there's so many armies coming here. And Elisha said, God, open up his eyes. Let him see who actually is on our side. And God opened up the heavens to his servant and showed him that there's chariots and angels and so many heavenly beings on the side of Elisha. Now Elisha, in his turn, asked for God to also blind the soldiers. The soldiers got blinded, and Elijah brought them in to Samaria. He brings them right into the capital, just about, brings them in, says, God, open up their eyes. Their eyes get opened up, and they're in the middle of their enemy's territory, surrounded by all sides. This is truly a miracle. God basically gave them up to Elijah, to Israel. And the king is like, whoa, should we kill him? Just kind of fix this problem right now? And Elisha's like, no, don't do that. In fact, feed them, give them something to drink, and send them back on their way home. So that's what happened. The king of Aram got foiled again. He tried to come in sneakily with his soldiers, take Elisha, the source of all his problems, capture him, but it didn't turn out the way he expected. And this made him even more mad. And now we get into the story. Sometime later, Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, mobilized his entire army and marched up and laid siege to Samaria. There was a great famine in the city. The siege lasted so long that a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels of silver and a quarter part of dove's dung for 5 shekels of silver. Now, for those of us who have never been sieged before, here's what this means. It's a very interesting military tactic where you're not attacking anyone. You're not throwing spears. You're not, taking your swords out and fighting. You just surround a city and wait. You just maybe wait a day, maybe a week, maybe a month until the city surrenders. You cut off all supplies so nothing's coming in, nothing's coming out, and you lay siege to it. So that's what this king decided to do. Like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to fight anyone. I'm just going to sit out here and wait out their own demise. They're the ones that are going to come to me begging for mercy. So once he did that, there was nothing coming in, nothing coming out. All stores were closed, quarantine, level 100. Everything was shut down. And this is what their economy started to look like in our terms. A donkey's head went for $307. And, the leftovers of a dove, dung, actually, literally, went for $25. That's how hungry people were. There's really no meat on a donkey's head, it's just bones and skin. But people were willing to pay that much money just for a tiny morsel. People were desperate because this is what they faced every single day. Their plates were empty. They weren't facing stress. Oh, the dry cleaners gave me the wrong shirt. Or, oh, I can't get out the stain from the carpet. I'm stressed out. No, for them it was literally life and death. They were starving to death because their enemy, the king of Aram, was sieging them and causing this really bad problem for them. What would you do in this situation? I wouldn't pay that much for a donkey's head, I'll tell you that.
Run away.
Run away.
Pray for a miracle.
Pray for a miracle. I remember, we weren't...
Order food to go.
Right, get some DoorDash. We weren't starving by any means, but I remember when we were still young, my parents went out of the house, and Alan and I were home alone, and we got really hungry, but we didn't cook anything up, so we literally cut out pizzas from the magazine and pretended to eat that. We could have ate some cereal or something, so it was more just, nonsense more than anything. But I remember that very vividly, I'm so hungry, I wish I could have pizza, and I'm just cutting it out of the magazine and pretending to eat it. For these people, it's even worse than that. Way, way worse. So what would you do in this situation? Somebody would run away, somebody would pray for a miracle. Let's see what they actually resorted to. As the king of Israel, the besieged king, was passing by the wall, a woman cried out to him, "Help me, my lord, the king." The king replied, "If the Lord does not help you, where can I get help for you? From the threshing floor, from the winepress?" Then he asked her, "What's the matter?" She answered, "This woman said to me, 'Give up your son so we may eat him today, and tomorrow we'll eat my son.' So we cooked my son and ate him. The next day I said to her, 'Give up your son so we may eat him.' But she had hidden him." When the king heard the woman's words, he tore his robes. And as he went along the wall, the people looked, and they saw that under his robes he had sackcloth on his body. He said, "May God deal with me ever so severely if the head of Elisha, son of Shaphat, remains on his shoulders today." They faced a very big problem. And they were reacting to this problem the only way they knew how. There is nothing to eat. I know, let's eat our children. That's how convoluted their thinking started to get, because the situation was very, very stressful. Dire situations lead to dire decisions. When we face a stressful situation, we sometimes don't think straight. We don't sit down and think, okay, well, what would be the best way out of this? They thought, oh, here, I see my son running around. Let me get him and throw him in the pot. And next day, let's do your son. And this was probably, one situation happening in the entire kingdom. These people were freaking out. They didn't know what else to do because starvation will make you go crazy. It really will. And that's how they reacted. Very sad story. Very sad scene. Let's keep reading. Now Elisha, the prophet, was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. The king sent a messenger ahead, but before he arrived, Elisha said to his elders, "Don't you see how this murderer is sending someone to cut off my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door, hold it shut against him. Is not the sound of his master's footsteps behind him?" And while he was still talking to them, the messenger came down to him. The king said, "This disaster is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?" Here's a mistake that many people make when they face a problem, when they face a stressful situation. It's God's fault. Why did God bring this calamity down on me? Why did God put me in this stressful predicament? And the king of Israel immediately came to that conclusion. This disaster is from the Lord. Why should I wait for him any longer? He's the one who's doing all this bad to me. He's the one who's starving out our city. He's bringing us into this stressful situation. And many people quickly resort to that reaction. I'm in this really bad spot. I don't know what to eat. I don't know where to work. I don't know what to do, this and that. God, why did you bring this on me? And this king was no different. He quickly blamed God for his very stressful predicament. But Elisha was a man of God. He was a prophet. He knew God. And God was telling him things. He was telling him truths and opening up revelations to him. And Elisha said to him, "This is what the Lord says. About this time tomorrow, a seah of the finest flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria." The officer on whose arm the king was leaning to said to the man of God, "Look, even if the Lord should open the floodgates of the heaven, could this happen?" "You will see with your own eyes," answered Elisha, "but you will not eat any of it." So you guys remember the economy, right? What was the donkey's head going for? $307. Bird poop, how much was that going for? $25. And here's a prediction that Elisha makes for the stock market of the future. He says it's going to look like this. 2.5 gallons of flour, about 24 cents. 5 gallons of barley, about 24 cents. He turns the entire thing on its head, and he's like, all these problems that you guys are so into, and you're up to your neck in it, tomorrow everything will change at the drop of a hat. And not only will it just kind of change, it will radically change. You'll never want to buy a donkey's head again, because you can get all the flour you want. You can bake all the bread you want, make all the peanut butter and jellies that you want. And that's what the Lord told him. Now let's look at the reaction of, the captain, the king's captain. Here's what he says. Even if the Lord should open the floodgates of the heavens, could this happen? He's saying even if food started raining down from the sky, would that really happen? You know what he's saying? He's saying that is impossible. That could never happen. What you're saying to me, Elisha, is not true. It can't happen. I just paid $300 for a donkey's head, and now you're telling me I can have all the flour I want for under $1? He didn't understand. He didn't want to understand. He said that's impossible. Well, let's see. Let's see if Elisha's prediction came true. Now, there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. Not inside, just at the entrance. They said to each other, "Why stay here until we die? If we say we'll go into the city, the famine is there and we will die. And if we stay here, we will die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we live. If they kill us, then we die." So these guys are not even in the city. They know there's a famine. They know they're being sieged. But lepers, they were not led inside the city. They were not allowed. So it was a very horrible disease, a disease that you could easily get sick from if you came into contact with these people. So they made sure that these contagious individuals were outside of the city. Basically, they were outside of the problem. They were not in the famine. They were not in the city. Yes, they had their own illness they were dealing with, but here they're forced to make a decision. Either we die, or we die, or we die, but hopefully maybe live. We'll see what happens. So these are lepers, castaways, sick people. And they decided, you know what, we can't go in there. We go in there, we'll starve to death. We stay out here, we'll starve to death. The city or the kingdom that's laying siege to us, they might have something. Maybe they can somehow give us a way out. Even if they don't, we have nothing to lose anymore. So we're going to go do that. At dusk, they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans. When they reached the edge of the camp, no one was there. For the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army. So that they said to one another, look, the king of Israel had hired the Hittite and Egyptian kings to attack us. So they got up and fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. What a very curious thing that just happened. This kingdom came with all its might, all its power, was successfully sieging Samaria. And all of a sudden, around evening time, they hear all these chariots and horses. I don't know if you guys ever been to like a nicer house, but they have these like speakers in the rocks on the ground. So you can't really tell that they're speakers. So that must have been what happened there, Music just started coming from the rocks or the trees. I don't know. God made them hear as if they were being attacked. A truly miraculous thing was happening. They got so scared they left everything. And they left in such a rush. They didn't pack up their tents. They didn't even get their horses, which think about it, a horse might be faster. But they didn't have time to even think about these things. They were so scared they just booked it. And they left everything. And the lepers, here they are coming to, hopefully, can you guys spare our lives? I mean, you probably won't, but it's our last sort of chance here. And they come and they see an entire camp of just anything and everything you could possibly want. Very interesting. Now they come in there, and they're like, well, guys, let's party. And they start eating, and they start drinking, and they start taking all this gold and silver. And they're like, let's go hide it. And they hid it, came back, let's get more stuff, let's go hide that too. And they were just kind of like living it up for themselves. And then wait, stop, well, hold on, let's think about this. There's a whole city here that's starving to death, and we're doing this? No, let's not do this, guys. We don't want to, take on the punishment of being those guys, those individuals who take everything for themselves. Let's tell them. Let's tell them. This will be such amazing news for them. So they went and called out to the city gatekeepers and told them. We went into the Aramean camp. No one was there. Not a sound of anyone. Only horses tied up, Mustangs probably, donkeys, and the tents, left just as they were. The gatekeeper shouted the news, and it was reported within the palace. Now let's think about this, right? In no strategy of any general, king, soldiers, anything at all, was this tactic ever written down. Just stay besieged until God makes them think they're being attacked. They'll run away, and then you go out and enjoy the spoils. It just doesn't work that way. It's not logical. Here's what's logical. You're besieged. You have no way out. You're starving to death. Buy a donkey's head for $300. That doesn't work. Boil your own son alive. That was the logic that they started buying into, thinking this is the only way out. Here's a shortfall of human logic. We think that there's a period at the end of it. This is the only way, period. Leaving no room for miracles, leaving no room for God to work. But those lepers, they thought, let's try another way. We'll go right into our enemies' camps. Let's see what they have for us. Again, not a good strategy to go and knock on your enemy's door and say, hey, have mercy on me. I know you're trying to kill us, but, maybe wild card. Maybe for me you'll show mercy. But they went in there, didn't pray for anything. Didn't ask God to rain down fire or just destroy the enemy. Nothing. They just went and said, we'll see what will happen. We're going back to what we read about stress, right? 75% of Americans suffer stress. They go to the doctor, say, hey, I'm ailing with this and that kind of stressful situation. And I asked you, what kind of medication would you give this person? And what did we read? What's the greatest place to start? A new perspective. Sugar pill. Russ said chill pill. A new perspective. If you don't have room for a new perspective in your life, you probably will die. See, the captain didn't have room for new perspective in his life. He told Elisha, impossible, will not happen. Verse 17, now the king had put the officer on whose arm he leaned in charge of the gate, and the people trampled him in the gateway, and he died, just as the man of God had foretold when the king came to his house. As it happened, the man of God had said to the king, about this time tomorrow, say of the finest flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria. But the guy who said impossible, will not happen, Elisha said, you'll see with your own eyes, but you won't try it. And that's exactly what happened. Here's the thing with stress. It tells you that there is no other way. It sells you itself from outside and says, bring me in. As we talked about, stress comes from extrinsic factors, from stuff that's happening outside. When we buy into it and we say, yeah, this is the only way, that's when we let it into ourselves and it starts destroying us from within. See, what the prophet Elijah said happened. That's exactly what happened. But not everyone got to try it. So this is a powerful story that we read in the Bible. And this whole story tells us what our reaction should be to stressful situations. Let's summarize. The people in Samaria saw a stressful problem. We're besieged. We're starving to death. There's no way out. The prices are crazy. There's no work. There's no food. There's just zero ways out. That was the people's perspective from inside that kingdom. Here's what's God's perspective. That's an opportunity. I can defeat the enemy and feed the entire kingdom for basically free, for pennies. God saw that same exact situation, that same stressful problem that everyone was living with, and saw it as an opportunity. But hold on, I can be glorified in this. I can help you out in such a way you didn't even think about. The captain didn't believe that could happen. He was limited to his own perspective. Elisha tried to give it to him. He said, here's a new perspective. Here's something you haven't thought about. This time tomorrow, everything will be okay. And he was limited, and he paid for his perspective with his life. Is our perspective of stress worth our life? As we read in the beginning, stress changes our molecular structure, our DNA. It causes you to live less. Is your perspective of buying into that stress worth your whole life? Here's a really key ingredient in that whole entire story. The salvation came from the lepers. It came from God, but through the lepers, because they lived beyond the walls of the problem. They had a much different perspective than the Samaritans. They gave themselves a choice. 3 choices. Either this, or either that. We're going to keep trying something until we live. We're going to keep going and finding out new ways. We're not going to limit ourselves even though we're literally dying of this disease and we're not allowed to touch people or talk to people. But the people inside Samaria didn't think that way. They thought, I'm going to, go as far as I can to the edge of humanity to just give myself a little morsel of food and put it on my plate. Here's the problem. The king of Israel forgot that he was the king of Israel. That Israel was literally God's chosen people. He could have been the Hittites or the Amorites or the Moabites. And then, he would have probably looked at this a little differently, but he was the king of Israel. God says, Israel, I'm going to be with you. You'll be my nation. You're going to be my people. I'm going to take care of you. But when the problem came, he immediately pointed to God and said, God, you're the cause of this problem. But he wasn't. It was the king of, the other country. It was enemies from beyond the walls who just kept trying to invade Israel. This will happen. The Bible never says that you won't face tigers in your life, that you won't face enemies or you won't face stressful situations, or that you're not going to get into those kind of predicaments. But we can't be quick to blame God. God's not in the problems. Problems might be there. What we need to understand is how we should look at them. The king of Israel looked at it wrong. He wanted to kill Elisha, the only prophet of God around. He was just not thinking straight. But God took them out of the problem in a very miraculous way. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. They didn't know that they were being starved, besieged, so that God may lift them up in due time. God didn't let them be besieged to die. For God, it was an opportunity to yet perform another miracle, stomp out the enemy, drive them out, and feed his people for dirt cheap. But people couldn't think of it that way. They couldn't see that perspective. They didn't want to. They were enveloped in their stress. Because he cares for you. He cared for the people of Israel. Even though they sinned against him, they turned their backs on him many, many times, and God's like, you guys just don't get it. I keep trying to tell you the same thing over and over. You still worship idols. You still do all these bad things. You don't get it that I'm supposed to be your God so that I can take care of you. I drove you out of Egypt. I took you across the Red Sea. And I still have plans for you moving forward. But the king of Israel said, no, you brought this problem, God. You're the reason why. And that's why 1 Peter chapter 5 says, humble yourselves. What does this mean? Humble yourself. Does this mean that, I wear sackcloth all day, put ash on my head? I'm very humble. Humbling myself means I need to deny my own logic. I have to give up my perspective. And I have to accept the fact that there might be a different perspective. God's perspective. And this perspective might not at all have anything to do with how I feel, how hungry I am, or how the situation might look like. The situation looked really bad for them. Terrible. We've talked about the details of what people they did because they thought that's all they had left to survive. Now let's look at this other part. Cast all your anxiety on him. And people stop there, and they put a period, and they think it looks like this. You put your anxiety in a bag, and you just cast it away. There it goes. Don't have to show up to work today. Why? It gives me anxiety. I'm just not going to go. This family, they keep like arguing with me. I'm just going to go start a new family. I just got to cast that away too. And people think that just because something is stressful or because there's a problem, it's just abandon it. Throw it away. But that's not what is being talked about here. Humbling ourselves means that we need to understand that God cares for us. He doesn't want you to throw it away. He wants you to accept his perspective. He wants you to take your anxiety and do something with it and fix it in such a way you might not have even thought of. Like we read about the kingdom of Samaria. We read this verse earlier today. Bring it up again. For I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. See, the kingdom of Israel probably, they didn't get to this place in Jeremiah before their time or after their time. But they should have known. They should have connected the dots. Said, hold on, I'm an Israelite. I'm God's nation. God works with us. He's done hundreds. He brought manna from heaven. He brought doves out of the sky that landed almost on the Israel's plates. Couldn't he have done something for us today? And the captain said, impossible. Floodgates will open. Not going to happen. But here's what God says. I want you to prosper. I don't want to harm you. And I want to give you hope and a future. This sounds like a caring God. So, if I'm in a position that isn't prosperous, doesn't give me hope, doesn't give me a future, then I need to stop and think. Where's all this stress coming from? Where are all these problems coming from? The kingdom of Israel had a problem, a very serious one, and they didn't know how to solve it. They were going their own ways, and they were doing it really, really badly. They were not succeeding. They would have all died if they continued. Finally, the king said, I'm going to go talk to Elisha. Yeah, I'm going to go kill him, but I'm going to talk to him first. And Elisha said, okay, you've come to me. I'll tell you what God says. God says this time tomorrow, it'll be better than you could have ever thought of. God could be using the problem, the stressful situation, the whatever it is you're facing, as an opportunity to either bring victory and glorify his name, his power, his strength, his authority, or he wants me to step outside of it and gain a new perspective. The lepers were outside of it. They had a perspective the entire kingdom of Samaria didn't see. That these camps are empty. There's tents and horses and donkeys and food and wine and anything you could think of, and it's all there for the taking. But they didn't step out of their own comfort zone, their own walled up kingdom, where they were just drowning in their sorrows, didn't even bother to step outside and say, well, let me go check it out. So 2 reasons. One, the problem could be an opportunity. And this is a perspective we have to really think about. This doesn't mean that these problems, okay, this problem's happened, or maybe I got in an accident, maybe something horrible happened, God must be working with me now. That's not what this is saying. What this is saying is that if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be, and from outside the problem starts coming in and trying to invade my life, and it keeps trying over and over and over again, and now it's starving me out and trying to besiege me, and I have nothing to do with it, then I have to look at it and think about, what is God trying to do here? God might take these problems and do something with it. 2 negatives make a what? Positive. What about 3 negatives? Now it's back to minus. Sometimes 2 bad things happen, they could be going for your favor. But once you start adding in as a 3rd negative, it's just going to go downhill from there. So for us, it's important. Maybe we do need to step outside, get that new perspective. Because stress kills, as we read. Stress damages from inside out. And we should hopefully know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. For those who are called according to his purpose. We talked a little bit about this on Tuesday when we talked about faith. There was a situation, there was a party. And things went bad at the party. What happened? The wine dried up, just went away somewhere, evaporated into the bellies of all the people who were there. But the wine dried up. I mean, for us, this is probably, not a very relatable concept because we go to wine, we go to weddings, we know we have kvass. Kvass dried up, okay, now we have a problem. Now we're starting to understand the essence. But for there, in those times, wine was a very useful ingredient in not just weddings, but daily life. It was more trustworthy than water because you drink water and you don't know what was in it. There's it could be sterile, could be not. You really didn't want to take that risk, but wine, was always good. And especially when they were trying to have a good time. So the wine dried up. Now the people of this wedding, Mary especially, could have reacted one of two ways. They could have started trying to solve it their own way, like the people of the kingdom of Samaria did. We're going to start buying donkey heads. We're going to start, taking things out of the trash, seeing what we can find there. And they started kicking in their logic. But Mary said, brings the servants of the wedding, takes them to Jesus, and says, do what he tells you to do. Now that's a new perspective. That's a different kind of perspective that the people of the kingdom of Samaria didn't think about, except for Elisha. God, what do you need me to do? Tell me. Do you need me to go outside and, not even put on an armor or anything like that and just face the enemies with my bare hands? I'll do that. And then you come out there and they're not even there. So during that party, we read what happened. Jesus tells them, go get the water. They get the water. Put it into these jugs. They put it into these jugs. Now go pour it. Go serve it. And they're serving it. And what happened? It was the best wine. It wasn't just so-so. It was the best possible answer to that stressful situation. Can bad things work together for the good? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. But it all depends on our what? Perspective. We can see it as bad and have that bad come inside us and make us part of the bad until we're feeling bad, looking bad, thinking bad, and we become part of that bad. Or those bad things can just work out amongst themselves and God can use it as an opportunity. We're going to read a little bit about Lazarus and start to wrap up. Lazarus, a friend of Jesus, died. One of those worst situations where there just seems like there's no way out. And Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone. Basically, it's like you're coming to a funeral. It's like pop open the coffin, take it out of the ground. It's like, whoa, why would you do that? We're not going to start, taking dead bodies out of the ground. First of all, very unclean. You're not allowed to touch a dead body according to the Israelite traditions, the Jewish traditions. But he says, take away the stone. He's saying, against what you think, against your traditions, your religion even, do something against that. Do what I say. Take away the stone. And he's immediately met with resistance. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days. What kicks in? Logic. I can smell it, I can see it, I can touch it, and it's there, literally. And she's not lying. there is a dead body behind the stone, and it has been laying there for 4 days. And you don't need to be an expert on science to know that it stinks. So she wasn't saying anything new. She was saying facts. Here's the problem with facts. They are sometimes lies. Oh, they're facts, but they're also lies. The kingdom of Samaria was besieged. Fact. Starving to death. Fact. They thought the only way out was to start eating children. Lie. To buy donkey heads for $300. Lie. Wait it out one more day, and then food will be so cheap you couldn't even think about how cheap it would be. But the captain said impossible. Not going to happen. And here's what Jesus says to everyone who meets him with that resistance. But, see, that's the first word she says. But, hold on. Yeah, you said that, but I have an opinion. I have a perspective that I truly believe in. Jesus says, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? If you're a doctor, 75% of your patients dealing with stress, you tell them, circle the bait, take a step back, look at it, new perspective, and you'd be right. Jesus one-ups that. It says you don't just need new perspective, you need faith. You need to have a perspective not from this world, but from the sky. Literally, from outer space. My perspective. Jesus isn't locked down to this world, to this world's laws, to these principles, to these facts and science that so many people hold dear. Jesus' faith is something that exists way beyond that. And if you believe, you will see. If you believe in stress and the stressful situation, you will probably die from it. But even though you're facing a lion in the mouth, you can survive because I'm with you. Even if you're thrown into a fiery furnace, not a hair on your head might get burned. And so on and so forth. Moving forward into this week, you might get tested on just what you learned today, which is good, because now you can put into practice that what you learned. I get tested on this on a daily basis, even today, right before, coming here, because this is such a powerful concept. The world says, stress out, take a chill pill, go to the doctor, he'll take care of you. Yeah, you're balding, you're growing white hair out of your ears, but you're only 21 years old. So what? Just keep going. It's actually another study I didn't put up here, but teenagers have so much stress, more so than adults had 50, 60 years ago. So this problem is ramping up. And now it's affecting smaller kids. Why? What predators are we facing? What enemies are we fighting? They're all up here. These enemies that break into our brain and say, hey, there's no way out. Believe the stress. Believe these facts that you can't. And once we believe that, we will not see the glory of God. The captain didn't believe it. He saw the glory of God, didn't get to try it for himself. And that's what happens to people who believe so much in their stress, believe in their perspective, that there's no room for God. It's time to doubt in my perspective and believe the Word of God, which says He loves us. He cares for us. He wants to give us hope, future, prosperity, His way, not my way. I need to maybe figure out, what is that future? Is it what I want? And is that what I want lining up with what He wants? The people of the kingdom of Samaria didn't think they had a future left. They thought that was it for them. But God had a really intense, miraculous plan where He wasn't just going to destroy their enemies, He was going to give them everything the enemies owned. Is that a perspective? Those people that might not want to give you a job, You'll be their boss one day, maybe. Maybe that might be the case. Or maybe like you're trying to buy a house, trying to buy a car, maybe you'll get one for free. It'll just show up on your driveway. There it is, Maserati or something. I don't know. How did that happen? I don't know. See, when we limit ourselves to the science and facts that we think is the only reality here, that's all we're going to be limited by. Last time we talked about, you can be anything you want to be, right? And what is it that we should want to be? Sheep. Someone remembers. A shepherd, a good shepherd, doesn't lead his sheep into slaughter. I mean, here, in McDonald's country, that's, the cows and farming, that's another story. But a good shepherd does not lead his sheep, just like takes care of them. He makes sure they're okay. One gets lost, he leaves the 99 to go find the one that gets lost. And if that's the God we believe in, that's what we will experience in our lives. To summarize what we talked about today for this entire Sunday. In the beginning, we talked about how plans might not sometimes go according to plan. And that might happen. And the kingdom of Samaria was not on their calendar to get besieged. They didn't think that they were going to start starving to death. It was not on their plan. But God was going to use that as an opportunity to show how powerful He is yet again. To show that He can have a way out that people didn't even think about. Secondly, we read about how important it is to not cause others to stumble. Sometimes we think, I'm responsible for myself, for the things I do good, for the things I do bad, and whatever I say, whatever I do, yeah, I will be held responsible for that. But we sometimes tend to forget that there's people around us, and that we'll also be responsible how we influence those around us. And if we influence them in a really bad way, in such a way that we cause them to stumble and sin, God has something in store for us, and it's nothing good. And it's so important that we remember that it's something as basic as even arguing. That when we argue with someone, that person we're arguing with can look at us and say, well, wait a second. Aren't you a man or woman of God? And you're acting like this, and you're talking like this? Wow, I don't know if I want to believe in that kind of God. Well, I don't know if I even want to consider being a Christian anymore. And that person might walk away from faith, but you'd be the one responsible. And Jesus says, it's much better for this person to have a millstone tied around their neck and cast into the ocean. Last, but certainly not least, we learned about stress. Stress is there, stress is real, stress happens. Problems are something that we will face. 1,000 years ago it was tigers, today it's something else. And most importantly, it's mainly in our head if we let it get there. Stress happens outside of us. It's the situations we face, how we deal with it, how we react to it. That will either let it come flowing right in and causing, ravenous destruction in our lives, or we put the gates down and we say, not today. Not for me. For them maybe, but not for me, because I know something different. God has something planned for me because He loves me, because He cares for me. He wants me to have hope, prosperity, and a future. And that's the God we believe in. Amen.
Amen.
Now let's wrap up with a song.